Being 7 o'clock, I'll call the Marathon County Board of Supervisors to order, please. We will start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Please remain standing. Following the Pledge of Allegiance will be a silent moment of reflection. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We'll have the reading of the notice, please.
An educational meeting of the Marathon County Board of Supervisors will be held at the Marathon County Courthouse Assembly Room, 500 Forest Street, Wausau, at 7 p.m. on February 16th, and the agenda was duly signed and posted.
Thank you. I would like to request everyone, please silence your cell phones and any other electronic devices, or put them on silent or vibrate as to not be an interruption to the meeting, and I thank you for your cooperation. And we'll proceed with roll call and ask everyone to please sign in. And I would like to welcome all the visitors that we have with us this evening, including the viewing audience, and hope that you find our meeting informational and informative. So with that, we'll move on to item number 7 on the agenda, and that is public comment. And I did not have anybody approach me, nor did anybody approach the clerk to offer public comment. So we will move on to educational presentation reports. And we will start with the first item, item 8AA, a presentation on worker shortage in Marathon County. And we are so honored to have with us this evening the Executive Director for the Greater Wausau Chamber of Commerce, Mr. Dave Ekman. And we also have with us Mr. Dale Knapp from the Forward Analytics in WCA. So with that, I would invite Mr. Knapp up to provide the presentation, and also Mr. Ekman. Just a little aside, Mr. Knapp has been known to be described as probably one of the most educated and smart individuals in the state of Wisconsin, and that's by somebody by his name of his boss. So, and I would have to tend to agree with him. So, Dale, please.
Thanks, Kurt.
You want to on the front here with the speaker, the.
Perfect. Thank you. So as Kurt said, I'm Dale Knapp. I am the Director of Forward Analytics, which is the research arm of the Wisconsin Counties Association. I've been with WCA since 2018. And essentially what we do is we do research on major issues affecting Wisconsin. And of late, we've done a lot of focus on workforce issues, housing issues, various demographic issues, which really fits right into what we're going to talk about tonight. How do we move? Oh, there we go. So what we're going to talk about briefly, and this is going to be sort of a big picture view here, is the demographics of the county. Some talk about housing a little bit, and that's going to, the demographics part is going to move into some childcare issues, which I think are really important. So that's sort of the big picture. I put this slide in here not to brag, but essentially one of the things I'm going to talk about is what the counties may look like in 10 years or 15 years. And economists have a bad reputation in terms of forecasting. We generally forecast economy, et cetera, and usually we get it wrong. Demographics are much easier to forecast. So in 2004, when I was at the Taxpayers Alliance, we wrote a piece called Wisconsin's Future, where essentially we said in 2004, by 2015, our workforce was going to start to flatten, and after 2020, going to start to decline. Essentially, we're going to see workforce shortages. So a lot of what we're seeing today, we knew back then. So what I mean by that is when we look out now, the next 10 or 15 years, we're not going to get it exactly right. But we're going to be pretty close in terms of what Marathon County looks like, what the state looks like, unless we make major policy changes. One of the things we talked with legislators about in the 2000s was, this is coming, we need to do something with migration, turn migration patterns around, et cetera. Nothing happened, and we are where we are. So unless we do something proactively to change, I can tell you pretty close to what you're going to look like in 10 or 15 years. So let's start with workforce. So in terms of the labor force, both statewide, in the orange, and Marathon County, the green, the teal, we're seeing a slowing in terms of labor force growth by decade. The 1990s really in so many economic measures were prime years for us. The economy boomed. If you remember back then, the late 1990s, we actually had workforce shortages then. Everything was going well. Our migration, we had huge migration into this state and into Marathon County, all of that growing the labor force. Since then, we've seen major stagnation in labor force growth. A total of 2% labor force growth between 2000 and 2010, and 0.8% over the last 10 years. So major slowdowns in terms of labor force growth. Given demographics, one of the things you're probably going to see over this next decade is more than likely at least no growth in the workforce, or possibly a decline. And the main reason for that is people like me, baby boomers, aging past 65, most of them retiring. So we had the first half of the baby boomers retiring between 2010 and 2020. That second half is retiring over this decade. It's a large group of workers in the labor force. As they age past, we're going to see some shrinkage. We don't have enough young people coming up behind that group to fully replace them. So that's going. We don't know exactly where we're going to be, but we know it's not going to be good. I'll go to the next one. So the labor force, think about the labor force is simply a subset of what I would call the working age populations. So the labor force is defined, or the working age populations are anybody 16 or older. Okay, that's the way the Bureau of Labor Statistics defines it. So now we're looking not just at those that choose to be in the workforce, but anybody of those ages. And I break this down in two age groups. One is 18 plus. Again, I said 16 plus for the labor force. The way the census reports data, it's easier just to use 18 and older. You'll get the same thing. And then the 25 to 64-year-old population, which is the bulk of your full-time workforce. So, when you get the 16 to 20, 16 to 24, a lot of that is part-time work. When you get 65 and older, you get some of them are working full-time. A lot of them are, as they head toward retirement, working part-time or working part-time to just supplement their incomes. And again, what you see here is that same growth rate declining. But one of the things you see, in terms of, this is Marathon County, that 25 to 64-year-old population, that piece that's really important for your workforce, over the past decade declined by 0.5%. The state, it was up, the state, it was up just marginally. The state numbers show that that population in Wisconsin is going to decline by 130,000 over the next decade. Something we've never seen before. Again, unless we do something to change that. Marathon County is already declining in that key age group. More than likely will continue to decline and probably see a 1, maybe 2% decline in that population. That to me is really, really critical, because again, that's the bulk of your full-time workforce, which employers need. So there's a couple of challenges that, again, both the state and Marathon County are facing here in terms of workforce, and how do we turn those numbers around? The first one is a long-term issue in terms of workforce, and that is a declining number of births. Statewide, births have been dropping almost every year since 2007. This is a number that every time I bring it up, it just blows me away. In 2020, the number of births in Wisconsin was the lowest since 1942. Think about the differences in populations between then and now. That's how far down we've dropped. In Marathon County, what you can see here is you're looking at about a 9% decline in births, but from the 2000s decade to the most recent decade. And again, Marathon County with a little bit of bumps up and down, following that same pattern of declining births. Why is that so important? That's really important for your workforce in 2035, 2040, 2045. Economists say it takes about 18, 20 years to create a worker. So when you're looking at declining births, you're looking at a smaller pool of young people entering the workforce in 18, 20 years. So that's a long-term challenge. There's another thing that's going on in terms of migration. Those patterns have been shifting for the negative. As I mentioned, the 1990s were a decade of major inflows of people into the state. And since then, we've seen some shifts in patterns. But what I want to show here is net migration by age group. So remember, this is net. So this is the total number coming in minus the total number coming out. Or if it's negative, it's the other way around. And these age groups are really critical. So one of the things we're seeing is Marathon County is actually doing very well among the very young, and the youngest, those under 10. I'm sorry, those under 5, essentially the young kids. So this is what this is talking about. This is really talking about young families, okay? Are young families staying or going to some degree? So that population, large net migrations coming in, both 2000 to 2010 and the most recent decade. However, again, that percentage is declining, so a little bit worse this most recent decade. The older, those older youth, those become much more challenging. The 5 to 9, as they age to 15 to 19 over the decade, losing a small percentage of them. Part of that is as they get to 19, 18, and 19, they're leaving for school. So there is some of that. That's a small portion of it. But for the most part, not doing nearly as well. We're Marathon County, and really any county in the state that doesn't have a state university, one of the university system universities, big losses in the young people as they go off to college. And you see that here. So the 10 to 14 age group, as they age to 20 to 24, a large number of them head to Portage County, to Brown County, to where Winnebago County, where the universities are. That's happening, and there's very little you can do about that. And the same thing with the 15 to 19, again, as they age, we're seeing them leave. This is also happening in the state, though. This is one thing that's really troublesome for Wisconsin. So we expect this in state, but in terms of statewide, we're seeing similar patterns in that we lose more young people than we gain in terms of those moving into their college years. And that's something that we need to figure out as a state, how to keep those young people here and be more attractive to those young people as they head into their college years. The other key group that I look at is those in their family, what I call their family formation years. So essentially 20 to 50. Wisconsin used to be really, really good in those age groups. That was where our strength was historically. When you think about it, it makes a lot of sense. Good schools, low crime, all the recreation. We had a climate here that was very conducive to young families, and we were attracting them. Something changed over the past 2 decades. It's still our strength, but we've gotten much worse at it. Marathon County, though, one of the things that I see here is Marathon County continues to do very well at those age groups. The 20 to 29, as they age to 30 to 39, still gaining, not as much. But the other 2 age groups, you've actually picked up over the decades. And so that's one of your strengths. That's something that you can build on. There's something here that is attractive to families, to that age group. And remember, that age group, that's a key part of your workforce. They bring kids with them. School, it's key for, it says something about your school. So that's when you're thinking about what areas do I build on, this is one area Marathon County should build on. Figure out what's making you so attractive to these families and build on that. So the big picture so far has been on people moving in and out of the county. There's something else that's going on in terms of workforce. So it's not just people moving, into Marathon County, out of Marathon County. Over the past decade, 12 years or so, one of the things we've seen both here and nationally, these are statewide numbers, but what we've seen is declines in labor force participation. So essentially that is what share of those of working age are actually in the workforce. And we've seen some declines in that. Now, part of that decline is the baby boomers aging past 65, and you see labor force participation go from, 80% or something before that to generally around 30 to 20%. So that's a big part of it. But there's another part that's much more troubling, and that is declines in participation among younger age groups. And in terms of men in Wisconsin, that's primarily 20 to 24-year-olds, declines from 84% to 80%. That's troubling. But the other big component in Wisconsin is a decline in female participation, women aged 25 to 54, and big declines in participation. 84 to 81%, 84 to 81%, 86% to 79%. We need to figure out what's going on there. And we have surveys that tell us a little bit about what's going on there. And that is the most consistent thing that the surveys tell us about that population is childcare is a big issue, either lack of childcare or unaffordable childcare. The other component of this more recently, so this has been declining pretty much for 10 years. More recently with COVID, there's another thing going on is that some of these women have said with COVID and the working from home and the kids at home, they've realized that their family life is better off if somebody is home with the kids versus using daycare. So there is some of that. It's more about family. So it's a combination. Then there's other factors too that are playing into it, but those sort of vary. One of the things that you're seeing in both statewide and in Marathon County is really a decline in the number of daycare slots. Now, I've not done much research on daycare, but when I was looking up daycare slots, you get numbers kind of all over the place. The trends match, but they don't generally match up, and I'm not exactly sure why that is. But I pulled some numbers from. This came from a study from the UW, some researchers at UW, a decline in the number of slots in Marathon County. There's also some numbers from Marathon County Pulse, which has licensed slots as well. They survey that. Their numbers are a little bit different. They're a little bit higher than this, but the decline is about the same. So it's a decline of roughly 700 to 800 slots over about 10 years. So that becomes, again, a challenge for workforce. Lack of daycare slots or unaffordable. That is going to get much worse, and here's why. I did a study a couple years ago on what's happening with pay by occupation in the state. And one of the things that you see, and this was from 2012 to 2020, one of the things you see is that, and it's expected with the labor shortage, is wages are being pushed up from the bottom. If you look at occupations by pay, the biggest gains were at the bottom, which you would expect in the labor shortage. These daycare workers are among the lowest paid workers that we have generally. As those wage pressures keep pushing and pushing up, they're either going to leave and go to jobs where they can make a lot more, or the cost of daycare is going to go up and up and up, making it even more unaffordable. So daycare, if you think it's bad now, there's a good chance that challenge is going to get much, much worse. And then finally, the other big challenge, this is a study we just put out. One of the things that I heard a lot when we were talking about the workforce declining by, or the main workforce, 25 to 64, declining by 130,000 over this decade, one of the comments I got over and over again was, well, that should then ease the housing shortage that we have in this state. And the answer to that is no, it doesn't. The reason is, yes, there's going to it's fewer of those people, but people of my generation are going to move past 65 and leave the workforce, but we're going to stay in our housing like every other generation has done. So we're going to have, by 2030, that entire baby boom generation is going to still be in their homes for the most part. But by definition, that's no longer workforce housing. So we're going to go from about 22% of housing occupied by 65 and over to about 35%. In some counties, it'll be up close to 40%, which means you need to build significant amounts of housing just for the young people that are coming up behind to replace. So there's a numbers issue. Statewide, we're talking 140,000 to 225,000 new housing units over the decade. That 140,000 we can hit. The 225,000, we've not done that since the 1990s. So it's kind of questionable. Marathon County is going to have that same issue. Now that's just numbers. The challenge is going to be, if you think about who that housing is really for, it's for young people coming into the workforce. So it's going to have to be affordable. It's going to have to be affordable housing, which, especially in terms of building costs, et cetera, that's a challenge these days. So not only numbers, but it's going to have to be affordable. We talked about the importance of migration. If you don't have enough housing, people aren't going to be able to move here. So if you want to attract more workers, if you want to keep people moving in here, you have to make sure that you have enough housing. That's going to be a big challenge over this decade, especially now when you have interest rates and mortgage rates very high. The housing market has kind of come to a halt to some degree in terms of building. We can't, in terms of the numbers that we need, we can't afford that. So it's creating a bigger challenge. But again, it's something that if you know about and you know what you need, it's something that can get done. But too often we don't know the numbers, and so it's a reason we did that is we wanted numbers in terms of what the needs actually are. But that's going to be another key component to keeping workers here, keeping businesses here, and even attracting workers from other states or from other counties and other states. Now, I will mention one thing, one challenge that does create, and this is a long-term challenge. So remember what I said, we're going to have 35% of housing occupied by those 65 and older. Over the coming decades, obviously, those are gradually going to come back on the market. We have, if you look at births, et cetera, we're going to have fewer young people coming up. There's a good chance that in 20 years, 25 years, we start seeing a glut of housing. Again, things can change, but it's a short-term challenge in terms of building. It's a long-term challenge in terms of do we have enough people to occupy all those houses. So with that, I'll turn it over to Dave.
And we'll save questions till both presentations and both presenters are done.
Thank you. Appreciate it. So just can you cue for me?
Just, yeah.
Okay.
Point or something.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity. I'm Dave Ekman. I'm President and CEO of the Greater Wausau Chamber of Commerce, and appreciate the invitation to be here tonight with Dale. So I want to take a little bit, my presentation is going to be a little bit different than Dale's, and what I'm going to do is take you into the Marathon County economy and really where the implications are for what he just talked about in our community. So if you could, next slide, please. So, okay, this is, go forward. Sure this is the right one. I had, there we go. Keep going. You know what? Something happened. Do me a favor. I had copied a slide, and it looks like I copied the whole slide deck. I don't want the whole slide deck. Yeah. Yeah, that's totally wrong. That's an old one. I'm on the workforce board too, and, so. I had copied an image. Yeah. Dave, then Seaboard. There we go. That's it. Okay. So let's talk about the challenge. First off, we're in Marathon County. We're isolated in the center of the state. So if you look at the state of Wisconsin, and there's nothing here to look at there, but if you think about the state of Wisconsin, you go down the eastern lake shore from Green Bay down to Milwaukee, and then you work across the Dane County, and then up the river to the cities. We've got a crescent. And what's very distinct about that crescent, it's got high population density, a lot of business and industry. And there we are in the middle of the state. We're an island. We don't have the luxury of an adjacent metro area like Milwaukee and Madison enjoy, or Eau Claire in the cities, and La Crosse. So we're at a very distinct geographic advantage, especially as Dale talked about with our numbers. And so when we look at this as a predominant rural region, and we start at the top, people, especially the young, leave for more opportunities in urban areas. My kids. I got one back, but my kids and many of those that we know. Employers find it difficult to recruit labor, and then the circle keeps going. Less investment happens in the area, the business shut. The public good suffers because the tax revenues aren't there and the businesses aren't there to help, and the jobs and the economy, less money, less employment, leads to declining services, and then people notice decline in lower quality of life. So it's a very insidious thing. It happens very slowly, and it is happening, and it continues. And as to Dale's point, there is something we can do, but it's going to take strong public policy at the city, in our townships, in our county, at the state government, and federal government. Next slide, please. So let's take you into our largest industry sectors. So we are very strong in manufacturing. We have nearly 21,000 jobs in manufacturing. And the gray bars that you see in this image, that is the location quotient. A location quotient is an identifying number of competitiveness. So here in Marathon County, manufacturing, we are 3 times more competitive than the national economy. Very strong. And then we have these other sectors, healthcare and social assistance. Just the nature of our location, we're at the bottom of the funnel where people from northern Wisconsin travel down to the greater Wausau region to get health services. Finance insurance, we're the farthest northern point of financial center here in Wisconsin. And then agriculture, one of our other industries. Now, people say ag's not important. Ag is so definitely important to our economy. It's a foundational underpinning of our economy. The things that are produced on the land get moved to the food processing plants and the factories, and the things that are made from our companies to support those food processing. It's an underpinning of our economy. So if you would take us to the next slide, please. So industry GRP, the regional product, the monies that are generated, manufacturing, 2.5 billion plus. Finance, insurance, you can see it goes down again where you see healthcare, finance, insurance, and then wholesale trade. These are the big generators. One more, please. So when we put this industry cluster information together, ag, forestry, finance, insurance, manufacturing, health and human services, you can see the jobs. And the average annual earnings, $75,745. And you can see the locations combined, 1,459. And you can see the total jobs from 40,000 up to projected out to 42,487. Now these projections are based on past performance, and so the algorithms project out this is where we can see change, where we can see it. To Dale's point, Dale made a big point, that things continue to devolve. And if we continue not to get the investment we need or change the community that we need to develop, we continue to lose. These numbers, they won't hold true. Next one, please. So the largest occupation. So what we're talking about the problem that he introduced, the implications, we have a strong industry sector here. The wonderful thing about where we are at, we have a diverse economy here, where we have a lot of driving sectors. A lot of communities don't have that strength that we have here. But when you look at the occupations, you see the production jobs, all of these jobs within our companies here. And when the companies start to see the shifts that they are seeing, and I'm telling you this is real, we are hearing from the smallest companies to the largest companies that they are looking at alternative locations. If you didn't know it, it kind of happened very slowly. It was insidious, but Siemens is no longer here. They're gone. Quietly shrunk buildings for sale. That's a multinational firm that brought Zimpro and the water purification, gone. Wausau Insurance, retired brand. Liberty Mutual, shrinking. This is happening in our community. It's happening all throughout Wisconsin and through the United States. So the industries with the jobs that are being supported here at high wage, high growth jobs, go to the next slide, please, are at risk. The public good, the dollars that come from people earning and spending in our community are at risk. The measure of competitiveness, this is what I wanted to talk to you about more specifically. These are the four sectors put together. And you see you want to be up in that upper right quadrant. That's where you want to be. It's growth, it's small, but that's our anticipated change if we can keep things on track, and that's what the algorithms say. So we are very competitive here with those four industry clusters that I'm showing you. Next slide. So we've gone from the industry to some of the production or the occupations, and now I want to take it down into the demographics. So in Marathon County, 25,273 millennials aged 25 to 39. National average for an area this size, 28,117. To Dale's point, we are not performing at that level. Another risk, another threat in front of us, retirement soon. Risk is high in Marathon County, national average for an area this size, 40,914 people 55 or older, while there are 45,515 here. So we are accelerating towards that retirement age, if you will. Diversity plays a big role in the growth and attractiveness of community. We know this, it's a fact. And then we have veterans here. The one thing that really is, to Dale's point, I think what comes clear in our advantage here for families is we are a safe community and we have low property crime. Those are two factors that play into decisions for people that want to be here. Next slide. The forecast. So talking about this is our population projections in these age cohorts. Dale touched on some of these in the broad sense. But you can go and you look at the far right, 50, all the way to the 85 and older, creating that inverted pyramid. So few younger people supporting a larger, older population, people leaving the workforce. And then up at the front end, there's some growth in between, but not enough to overcome what we're losing in those areas, plus on the back end, in that working age population. So the threats are real. If we would be seeing projections outward with that, with the light blue bar going high, might feel a little better about it. But everything that Dale has talked about, I can validate for you in the statistics in Marathon County, we have some work to do. Next slide, please. So the barriers to industry and economic growth. One, declining demographics. You can go back and look 20 years ago, and you could see what was coming based on the headcount bursts and where we're at. What we're experiencing now was supposed to be here in 2010. The Great Recession masked it a bit. COVID kind of tampered it a bit, but now as we are opened up and back at it, it's very, very much present for employees. Lack of skilled workforce. The importance of having a pipelining program from our K-16 to our post-secondary, either technical college or the university, very important. Lack of housing opportunities, workforce and affordable housing, single-family homes. Little story. He talked about it. I think there's an opportunity. My wife and I live in Rothschild, okay? And our kids, when they were in Madison going to school, one of them is back here now teaching special education, so we got one back, okay? But we decided we're going to sell our house and go live the downtown lifestyle, so we live at River Life. And we enjoy that. It is part of a quality of life that we want. I work down here. But a young family bought our house. 4 kids, mom, dad, in a whole new reinvented neighborhood where people my age move out, go into something a little bit smaller, a little bit more manageable, and allow another family. There's opportunity there, in my mind, in this community. What we're building here in the greater Wausau metro area is that opportunity to free up housing stock that way. To his point, building materials, people starting or building a new house right now, they're looking at anywhere between $175 and $200 a square foot. Can't afford it. Single-family homes we need to build. Again, the condominium units that were to be down by River Life working towards the eye clinic couldn't happen. And the reason it couldn't happen was the cost of goods accelerated, building materials accelerated to the point, and then the demand on housing, the prices just shot up. And they could not coalesce the buyer group to help fund that project to move it forward, just out of reach. And then access to affordable childcare. I have a friend who's in Madison, 2 kids, $34,000 a year. That's in Madison. Same here. It's a supply and demand issue. We need more licensed daycare providers, and NTC is doing a great job of that. They've got about 60 people going in their program. Business and industry is paying attention to both of these, and I'll tell you how. They will be part of the solution, but it's going to require a strong public-private partnership with government and not-for-profit agencies, faith-based organizations. To buy or rescue a child care center and get their employees access to those services. In doing so, frees up capacity out in the marketplace for others. If we're going to drive the price of child care down, we need more supply. We need supply of workforce, again, talking about the wage barriers that we have, and the access to the facilities. Businesses are also looking at building new projects to bring in production workforce. Production workforce will move. Younger, unattached, single workforce in production will move. Those production workers who are out in the rural areas, in rural communities that you want to try to bring here to live here, they don't move. They're embedded in their communities. They have their family support, they have their faith support, they have their schools, their kids are engaged. Not a reality to bring production workers unless they're untied to their community and you bring them here. And that's where the employers are looking at this point in time to be part of the solution. If you've not seen this, this is the housing study that was just introduced by the North Central Wisconsin Regional Planning Commission. I urge all of you to look at this. It's a very comprehensive study. And it's, to me, I know this organization, it's one of the best works that I've seen come out of this, and it's so relevant today. So things that we can do When I say we, I'm talking about the public or government or business and industry working together. Amend ordinances, allowing for smaller lots and setbacks as well as more options in multifamily for rent, for sale products. Public policy that we have today may not fit with what we need to do now and then in the future to attack some of the problems that we face. Working with developers, so the county has a lot of land. Think maybe differently about how that land gets utilized, where you could work with a developer who has some incentive to develop something affordable, very strategic, serves the citizens of the county, utilizes the public land that you have, and you incent building on it where there's a win-win. Win for the county, win for the developer. Again, higher density, to be very strategic about where we can put housing and get that into lower income areas, somewhat what the city's doing right over here on Thomas Street and then down on First Avenue and Stewart. These are areas here that the county should consider. Things we're doing now, and when I say we're, I'm talking about business and industry, city government, county government, municipalities. We have to think differently about the policies. Madison does too. Madison's got a lot of work to do to help this community, this county thrive, continue to thrive. Right now, the business community is moving along. There are companies that are looking at other locations. Mind you, we compete with Minneapolis-St. Paul. We compete with Milwaukee. We compete with Oshkosh, Fox Cities. And so when we had the gentleman over yesterday from University of Minnesota talking about headquarters economy and what it takes to keep people, there's a foundational thing. Outdoor recreation, grade schools, post-secondary, K-12, safe, affordable, a commitment to vibrancy. That's what people want. And it goes to Dale's point. What are we doing right? We have that here. But if we're going to attack this problem like we need to attack it, it's going to require all of us, business and industry, government, county government, to align and do the work that we have to do.
So with that, I'd open it up for questions for either of the two presenters that we have here. Questions by the board? Supervisor Robinson.
Dave and Dale, Dave, you addressed the issues relative to housing and what we can do relative to amending ordinances relative to lot size and setbacks, et cetera. What can we, what role, I would ask each of you to comment on what role we could play in other areas in the housing area and specifically in the child care area. What role have you, Dale, I would ask you, what have you seen across the state that's working and what trends and what are the opportunities for government?
It's hard to say what's working yet because we're just really starting to see sort of innovations. And what we're seeing is businesses working together in terms of childcare and creating, businesses that are nearby, creating childcare near and running that. We are seeing some examples, at least in the planning stages, of government getting involved with that, in terms of working with business, whatever, and putting together childcare. So as far as success, we've just not seen a lot of that yet. But I think there are innovative ways that we can, again, work with business, and this may not be the county as much. It may be the municipalities. The county may be involved, but I think you have to think innovatively about how you can partner with the cities, the municipalities, and the businesses in terms of childcare. It's being done across the country, a lot of these things. But it's still, a lot of those innovations are still relatively new. So, it's hard to say what's been successful.
Yeah, I would agree. Childcare is a complex issue. I mean, it's really, so many barriers. I mean, there's regulatory things that we don't necessarily want to get rid of the regulatory aspects that are important to make sure our kids are safe in childcare. But there are some licensing things that the state maybe should look at to make it easier. Then you have the childcare workers, those who give care. That's a significant issue, and just not even have the capacity, John. Let alone what businesses are doing, to Dale's point. They will, so it goes like this. If we don't solve this issue as a business, our business is going to suffer. So they are starting to work together, like Dale said, and develop co-ops. We don't have anything like that here, but you're looking at best practices throughout the country. We actually have one firm in this community that is very close to buying a child care center that is nearly out of business. And in doing so, you take that licensed facility and you hire staff, and now it becomes a child care facility for the company. Again, what that does, it frees up capacity where those parents would be taking their kids. The other thing that you think about, we are talking in our community about schools, maybe underutilized schools. They're licensed. Do they make sense? It's a rhetorical question. Does it make sense to look at those underutilized schools and leverage daycare operations in those licensed facilities? It's a question we have to ask. That's for the whole community to know how do we best attack this with the resources that we have invested into this community over decades, from county government, city government, townships. How can we rethink how we use those resources and investments that we've already made and reposition them accordingly? That's an innovation that is being looked at.
Okay, next we have Supervisor Wilhelm.
Thank you, Chairman. What I was wondering is, I work in a manufacturing sector, and what I'm noticing is that we're able to find general labor, and it seems people that have a little higher education, maybe that have something in the office, but our technical trades, it's getting pretty bleak. I mean, companies seem to be poaching employees from other companies, and we're not really seeing an influx of any new people coming out of the tech school. And is there that's got to come down to the high school level to some degree for shop classes, and trying to get some of these people that are in your general labor pool that are probably able to do these technical trades, but just need some way to get in there, because it's getting to be a big problem, and I can see it going way down in the future. And there's only so much you can do for automation, so I was just curious if there's anything going on with trying to draw more people into the technical college.
So we're at about a 2% unemployment rate. Our labor participation, I've seen it up as high as 70% here in this region. So you have that low unemployed rate, most people working, and in the middle, you have that demographic shift right now of what you're speaking of. We simply don't have the people. Are there efforts to bring high schoolers into apprenticeships? Absolutely. The technical college and even the university now is engaged in that. And that's a way to do that, to get the kids in. Pipelining them, pipelining from K-12 to post-secondary to business and industry is something that we work strong on with the Workforce Hub, and how we align what we're doing to make sure, for instance, here's what's going to happen here in the next month. We have businesses who need workforce. We have students who need internships and co-ops. The university system and the technical college system have a system called Handshake. And we're going to promote those out to our businesses, because most of our businesses don't know about it. Handshakes and an ability for the student to connect with business and industry to work. The other thing that we're doing is promoting in this hub is that for students that are coming back from out-of-state education, mom, dad, grandma, and grandpa say, hey, you're coming back, go to the Chamber's site, and you can connect with work opportunities for the summer. Now, why is this important? Here's why. One, it helps the business now. But two, for those kids, those students, the sooner we get them plugged into the community and they're part of the community, and we get them engaged and immersed in what this community is about, a greater likelihood we're going to keep them here, and they're not going to leave. It's a grow your own strategy. So we need more people.
And I think the other thing that needs to be done is, and this goes back a long way, and it's both, really, it's both the trades and it's manufacturing. A lot of people don't understand that, especially manufacturing, is not the manufacturing that people think about often anymore, you know, the old assembly lines. There's so much of it that's high tech, that, you know, that there's a lot of skill involved. And I think it's up to, you know, the schools and the parents and getting them to understand that manufacturing, you know, is there are really good manufacturing jobs. You make a good living, and you're not going to take on, you know, $80,000, $100,000 in debt and put yourself behind the 8 ball right away. So I think we have to, you know, make sure that they understand, you know, you're on your feet right away, making a good living versus taking 4 years, coming out with a degree that may or may not be as useful as you thought it was, and again, you're in a lot of debt. So I think there's a big educational component to it that we're not doing a good enough job in.
Next, we have Supervisor Dickinson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I had 2 questions. One, what about unlicensed childcare? Are there any analytics, any data about unlicensed childcare where, you know, maybe when someone said, I'm just going to have a friend, a neighbor, a grandmother, a grandfather, someone like that take care? Do you have any information on that?
I've never seen it. It's hard to get. It's underground.
Okay. Because I wonder if people just decided because it was cheaper or because of COVID or some other issue, I wonder if they decided to go that route. And so maybe the data for licensed is, so just a thought on that. Second thing is, you're speaking a lot about, I know you're with the Chamber of Commerce here in Greater Wausau area, but the question is, what about the rest of the county? How do all of these analytics, how does this data apply? Is there a difference between the two, between the kind of urban Marathon County and the rural?
I mean, I have my, yeah. It's depending where you're at, right? Anything like on the western part, southwestern corner, tied to Marshfield, a little bit better there. But I'll tell you, the numbers for the rural zip codes, and I didn't have that slide here, but I have that. I can get that for you. The outlook, it's not good. And it's because of what that next, really what it is from when you learn about the next generation and what they seek, they're not getting that in the rural community. They'll come here, or they'll go to other population centers where they can have it. Will they come back? That's yet to be determined. You got to remember, communities like ours, we're fighting to keep ours. Other communities are fighting to keep theirs too, and attract theirs too. What he's talking about in the state, and what I'm talking about, we are under significant threat demographically, especially in our rural communities.
Okay, Supervisor Stravinsky, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Couple things. First of all, I'm glad to hear that you're actually talking about education and a change in focus, because relative to manufacturing, one of the things we've done for the last 20, 30 years is we've demonized the trades. We have absolutely, within the educational community, we have demonized the track that says trade schools, tradesmen, manufacturing. That was a loser's track. And now we're coming back and we're paying the price for that. We're finding out, wait a second, maybe not everybody needs the 4-year or track to college or master's degree or what have you. So you've got something there. The question I have for you is, you pointed back to some demographic data where in the 90s we had a much higher positive influx. We had a net migration in. What have we done differently? Why did we lose that net migration in? And why are we now looking at a net migration out?
That's a great question, and it's one I get all the time. The challenge with migration data is we know where people live, and so we have surveys about. We can use tax returns. There's a lot of data we can use to figure out migration numbers. Unfortunately, we don't have any surveys that ask people why they're moving. I've talked with the Realtors Association because that's a group that deals with movers all the time, and they have a big database on all of the houses and stuff. They could easily add a few questions, just general questions about why they're moving, those kinds of things, which would inform this debate tremendously. But the only thing we can do is we can look at the data and look at migration by age, et cetera, and sort of infer things about why they're moving. And that's why I said, historically, you look at where we're the strongest, and that's in that young family age. And that really goes to, historically, our schools have been rated very, very high. Our crime rates are low. We have a lot of outdoor recreation. We have a lot of things that are very attractive to young families. And so that's our assumption that that's what was driving it. What's turned it the other way, where those numbers are declining a lot, I can't point to anything because things have changed some, but it's now. I will make one point. I think one thing that has happened that has changed things to a degree, and that was the national reporting in 2010 when Act 10 came out, and there was we got a lot of national attention, and that national attention didn't make us look very good, in terms of infighting, et cetera. The next several years, when I'd go on vacation and we'd go some other state, when we'd meet people or whatever, ask where you're from Wisconsin, one of the first things a lot of them would say would be, that there's that Act 10 or something, and it was just not a positive light. So I think that has had some influence, that we're viewed in a little bit different way. But it doesn't. Some of this goes back further than that, so it doesn't explain everything.
So if I'm hearing your rather long answer, what I heard is you really have no data on the why. All your data is just a snapshot of what.
Yes.
With no why behind it and no ability to get to why, including your supposition about Act 10.
We can get to why a little bit. So you can do.
You don't make policy on a little bit. You get data.
No. So you can take data in terms of national migration data, where people are moving, and do what's called regression analysis on that, on various factors that you think are important, and you can see how those measure up in terms of explaining people moving. And a lot of people do that with tax data, et cetera, and they say, okay, people are moving because taxes are high or low, et cetera. So you can get to some of that again, but it's not perfect. The ideal would be to have surveys of people that are moving and asking them, why are you moving, et cetera. And we just don't have that.
Okay, so one final question then for both of you, and that is that we have a couple of points that we can, or a couple of facets regionally that we can point to. Very low crime rates, very high quality standard of living, relatively speaking, having traveled a lot for business, a relatively low cost of living comparatively. What have we done regionally and nationally to publicize those advantages, both to the public at large and to business?
Well, as a state, we've not done much in terms of getting our message out. We just haven't. When you look, for example, at, again, this is data on young people moving. We have this really good new data set on young people moving, and so we know kind of exactly where they're moving, and they're moving to the big cities, out west, out east, et cetera. But one of the interesting things about that is, while young Wisconsinites are moving all over the country to places that they know about because they're big cities, the young people that are moving here, the vast, vast majority of them are from neighboring states. We get very few from further out. And it's probably, again, we don't have data, but it's probably just a lack of knowledge about what Wisconsin is. And Wisconsin doesn't do anything to get our message out as far as, what Wisconsin is. Now, I will say there's a group in western Wisconsin that has been doing some of that in terms of advertising what they have to offer to particular places across the country. And they've had some success in people moving here because they're basically saying, we're not what you think we are. We have all of these positives, and they're having some success with it. So there are some examples of it, but in general, we just have not done much.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a difference in administrations from Walker to Governor Evers at this point in time. Walker administration was more proactive, trying to promote. We have an opportunity, the governor has an opportunity. We should be promoting the state of Wisconsin more. We absolutely should. Now, remember when I started my comments with our region, okay? Wausau is not going to solve this by itself. Regionally, we fall under this Centergy umbrella. That's our Regional Economic Development Group. So that's Merrill, Tomahawk, some of that, Wausau, Marshfield, Stevens Point, Wisconsin Rapids. That's the Centergy region. Collectively, all of those chambers of commerce, we represent hundreds of thousands of people and a lot of businesses. But under Centergy, there's a new program starting this year. It's called Central to Success. And it's the region and it's all the chambers of commerce and communities coalescing together to develop a marketing campaign and execute. That was funded through a grant through the Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation and now has investments coming in from our corporations here throughout central Wisconsin. That's what you're speaking about. So there is an effort. It's not going to be Wausau doing it all by itself. We have to be bigger as a region. You remember our labor shed. People travel 30 to 60 miles one way to a job. So a lot of people who live here work in Stevens Point. A lot of people live in Marshfield, work here. So together in that region, we start to promote all the assets that we have. Now, for every community in that region, we all have to work together to build the shiniest, I call it the shiniest diamond, to be that shiniest in a region. And you set up a level of competition, and we're going to do this, we're going to do this, and you become better through that regionally. And a lever, I worked at the university for 3 years. I worked at the chamber for 7, went to the university for 3, and now here a 7 again. There's no, in this region, a comprehensive university like UW-Stevens Point and its opportunity here at UW-Stevens Point, Wausau, to bring in 7,000 to 8,000 fresh, shining, smiling faces every year for our employers to tap and access. That is such a significant opportunity. It's huge. The fact of the matter that we have NTC and we have UW-Stevens Point, Wausau here, that they're getting ready to do some big collaboration. We need to celebrate that, and we need to help it. It's huge. There's no other institution in this community, regionally, that can bring what a UW comprehensive institution can bring.
Supervisor Oberbeck.
I guess, thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess my question is in regard to part-time work. How do you feel that part-time work affects our workforce? That seems to take up a lot of, an individual working 25 hours isn't going to take on a 40-hour or additional hours. So we're actually minimizing that person's capability. Yet the jobs are out there, you drive by, they're always advertising for more workers, yet they're not utilizing their own workforce. And how does that affect what we look at?
What is happening, those employees that are looking to retire, before they do, the employers are engaging them and say, how would you like to work part-time? Keeping them in, keeping that knowledge in their business that way to help fill some of the gap.
But I guess I see a lot of younger individuals doing that work, out of college, trying to find a job. And the employers just aren't training like they used to. They're not investing in their employees, like apprenticeships or whatever, especially in the trades. So how do our current regulations really reward part-time work? You don't have to pay benefits. You don't have to do certain things. So that 30-hour threshold is there, and employers utilize it to their advantage, but then ask for more employees. So I see that as a contradiction as far as looking at how we can use our workforce the best we can.
I don't have any data on that, other than I can tell you employers that are now paying accelerated wages in manufacturing up to $20 an hour are offering training. You can go to the technical college and see how busy they are getting those skilled, just those basics for that employee to get engaged. That's what I can tell you what's going on here. Are there going to be employers who are going to work that edge, if you will, that game? Absolutely there are going to have.
And we have Supervisor Krause, please.
Thank you, Chair. As far as I know, childcare has been an issue for women and families for the last 50 to 60 years. With the influx of women attending college and going on for careers, the one thing that was lacking was childcare. So a lot of women left the workforce and waited until their children were in high school or graduated until they went back to work. So there was that huge employment gap there. They lost a lot of skills in the meantime. Things advanced. It was harder to get back into the workforce. There was an age issue. So there was a lot of discrimination at that time. Now the younger women in the generations, and the younger generations are being brought up through the ranks of corporate life and other kinds of businesses. And childcare did expand, but there were problems like who takes the child to childcare? I mean, there's all that extra time and running around. What if the child gets sick? Who's going to stay, get off of work and watch the child? Then there was the cost. So it was a lot of balancing, a balancing act for women at that time. And now we have some tax credits for childcare, which has helped women. That could be expanded for families to make it easier for women in the workforce. Also, corporations with a certain number of women, maybe 100 or 200, could have a couple of spaces where the women could bring their children to work. I do know that even like with nursing mothers, mothers who are nursing, that there's sometimes someone who brings the baby into them at work, and then they go to a particular room, and then they nurse the baby. But the baby is not kept there at that location close to the mother. And then there's always the worry that these mothers have about how's my child going to be doing with this child care worker in that situation, and so on. And there's some crimes that have gone on with child care workers, and damaging or even killing some of the children that they've cared for. So there's all those fears, and there's money issues. You mentioned something that I thought was sort of interesting, and I think that has been done and is expanding, and that is that now they've brought in early childhood education for 4 and 5 years old. So then possibly that could be expanded for 1, 2, and 3 years old. And the other thing, one of the board members mentioned about licensing, and they're very strict as far as I know for that. I worked in childcare, and I was also a teacher, and I also interviewed for a couple of childcare positions in Wausau area. And I do know that some of them are not really well trained. They're just out of high school, and they don't really know much about taking care of a young child, and just training them or spending time with them. I do know that for early childhood, that the educational system does require that they take and graduate from 3 classes, early childhood classes, before they can be certified to work in a child care center. So that's another area. And then, I had mentioned corporations. Then also it's a small business, increasing SBA grants for these small businesses. Obviously, you offer subsidies and all kinds of benefits to corporations. No utilities, no taxes, free land, whatever it is. But for small businesses, that doesn't happen so much. So that might be another area where you could bring more businesses into this location. Thank you.
Okay, next we have Supervisor Sandalski.
Thank you. I just had a comment. Like these companies that would provide childcare for the children, maybe like possibly giving them like tax breaks and things on that order so they attract people, and then we could give them like a tax break in return.
Tax incentives. Absolutely. As part of this, business is going to help to solve this. It will. It will make investments, and it will have an economic impact in communities throughout the state. But there needs to be a partnership with maybe some incentivization. You do this, and you have the measurables, you get a tax incentive for doing that. That's a state policy.
We got time for 2 more questions, and then we're going to have to move on. Supervisor Marash is next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. How did the federal COVID mandates affect the Marathon County workforce?
What was that?
How did the federal COVID vaccine mandates affect the Marathon County workforce?
Well, obviously, during the lockdown.
Microphone, please.
Yeah. So during when the lockdown happened, obviously businesses suffered greatly. The ARPA relief funds helped, especially from the federal government with the small businesses. Those in manufacturing that were deemed essential did fine. The small business, the service worker, adversely impacted. That was a tough time. So it drove. It took people out of the workforce, not by their own choosing. And those are some of the people that are still not engaged, that we need to re-engage. Here, in this is here.
Right. Do you have any numbers specifically at all?
I don't. It's really, those type of statistics are hard to gauge. You can see the unemployment, you can see the labor participation. But a lot of those folks are underground. You know, you call it underground, but they're laying low. They're making ends meet. But they it hurt a lot of people. It's tough. Really tough.
Last question, Supervisor Rosenberg.
Yeah, I guess I'd just like to say I heard all of this and the hand-wringing 30 years ago from the state. And here we are, wringing our hands again, but not actually, and I'm not pointing any fingers at anybody, but this is no surprise to anybody who's been watching it. Come on, the demographic change, the child care issues, those have all been there. Somebody's got to light a fire somewhere. I don't know who or how, but they've never done anything significant with it. And I guess that's all I have to say.
Yeah. Well, I totally agree with you. The difference 30 years ago really was when you looked forward, especially when people in Madison were looking forward, we were still, seeing that labor shortages, the big time labor shortages were 20 years out, 25 years out. They don't look that far out in Madison. They look to get, if they can get through the next budget, they're happy. So unfortunately, often there's just not a lot of really long-term thinking, and that's a real problem. Now we have the number, we're experiencing it, and we're looking, and the numbers say all of these challenges are only going to get worse. I don't know how you light a fire under them. We've been trying to do it for 20 years.
Well, the other piece of it, on the housing piece, you said we need 140,000 more units, but 20, 25 years from now, we need, I can't remember the number, 70,000 less or something. That's forward thinking. How are you going to do this? And is your investment going to go away? That's the thinking that should have been there 30 years ago.
When you started your comments, Terry Ludeman.
Yeah?
Yeah. So.
Oh, he was speaking about this.
Oh, yeah. Terry used overhead projector and little plastic sheets, But, yeah, absolutely. You're right.
So
We got to do something, folks. We have to. As a state, we have to. If we're going to compete, we have to light a fire. We got to do something.
So with that, I'd like to help me thank Dave Eckman and Dale Knapp for a great presentation. Thank you. So we'll move on to the next part of the agenda. We have an update from the administrator on the solid waste gas rights reacquisition. And we also have with us the interim director from the solid waste also. And so I'll turn it over to Lance, the administrator, first to give us an update.
Thank you, Chair Gibbs. I'll be very brief. I know you still have a fair number of things to get through on your agenda, but just to close the loop on some of our recent board meetings and committee meetings, including your January special meeting of the board, staff were looking to secure that landfill gas purchase agreement with the company that had purchased the stock of the company that previously held the existing landfill gas agreement. Very happy to report that after a lot of effort, very concerted effort, including quite a number of late nights and most of a recent weekend, we were able to execute that agreement on January 23rd, the landfill gas purchase agreement, as well as the accompanying site lease. As I referenced, and Dave Hagenbusher and Mike Pierner had referenced in previous meetings with all of you, the new agreement that we were working toward did a number of things, and the agreement we were able to sign ultimately concluded those things. And succinctly put, it's a couple. It's significantly more advantageous from a financial perspective for the county. Environmentally, it's far more sustainable, as the landfill gas that's currently being flared is now going to be cleaned by that third party when they get their operation up and running and made into renewable natural gas. And operationally, it's more beneficial to the solid waste department because we do retain some rights to a portion of the building on the site. So that's kind of where we are. While the agreement's signed, that certainly doesn't mean that our work has necessarily gone down. The workload has gone down. Staff continue to work with that company to iron out some of the operational issues we're working through. Most importantly, we're working on a communication plan to disseminate information relative to the project to stakeholders. So certainly more information to come, but as I started, I wanted to close the loop on the many meetings we had over that short period of time. So just providing that information to you. And in closing, I just want to again call attention to the work of Dave Hagenbusher, his team, Corporation Counsel, and our external consultant partners. They all did an excellent job. Very proud of the work that we did to carry out the will of the board relative to this issue. So that's all I had, Mr. Chair, in terms of an update.
Okay, thank you. So we'll move on unless there's questions. Okay, we will move on to next updates by standing committee chairs or designees. Any standing committee chairs or designees? Okay, we will move on to review and discussion of Tuesday meeting agenda items and/or ordinances are under 9A ordinances. From 9A1, Town of Eldron rezone, Lori Boots for Magdalene Conrad Trust. Ordinance 0-4-23. Any questions? Okay, we have item 9A2, excuse me, Town of Hall rezone, Jordan Weaver. Ordinance 05-23. Any questions? Okay, next we have from the CBZ department, we have with us Shad Harvey to answer any questions pertaining to item 9A3, amending the General Code of Ordinances for Marathon County, Chapters 15, 17, and 18, Ordinance 0-6-23. Any questions? Okay, we'll move on to item 9A4 was referred back to the HR Finance Committee, so that will not be up for vote on Tuesday. Next, we have resolutions. Items 9B1 from the Human Resources, Finance, and Property Committee. Resolution requesting the state to revise the current real estate transfer fee revenue sharing formula. Resolution 7-23. Any questions? Supervisor Sandalski.
Yeah, I just had a question. As I go to, I represent smaller townships, and I saw that resolution there, and I was wondering if there was any chance you could add like some percentage to money to go back to the townships, like instead of say 50%, add another 10% to, because I see a lot of these townships kind of struggling. And seeing some of that money, maybe if it's within the township, can't understand where I'm
Well, this money is the money that is the real estate transfer fee that is charged, that is collected when the property is transferred. And we'd have to look to see whether or not that would even be possible. That hasn't even been discussed as to whether or not that's even statutorily allowable at this point.
I was just questioning. Thank you.
Supervisor Robinson.
In the resolution is similar to resolutions that are being adopted across the state. The Wisconsin Counties Association is encouraging counties to weigh in to try to get back to where we were years ago. And there's been a shift of the transfer fee to the state, and we're trying to get it back. We collect the money in the county and send it to Madison, and we're just trying to keep more of it here.
And ultimately, the county is responsible for all of the recording work and all of the work that's related to those real estate transfers. So it's been over the years, it has shifted disproportionately to the state collecting more and more. So, any other questions? Supervisor Shafinsky.
Thank you, Chairman. Following up on that, as that's moved from 50%, now it's 85 or close to 100% going to the state. Where do we stand relative to the rest of the counties and also our representatives in Madison? Because we can pass all the resolutions we want. We're not going to actively change anything unless we can affect their votes in Madison.
Well, the percentages that are represented here are equal for all counties in the state. So this isn't unique to Marathon County. This is the percentages across the state.
Understood. I'm talking about getting movement in Madison to change it back, because we can't change it. We have to rely on Madison to change it. Correct?
Correct, and that's what we're doing is we're advocating on behalf of the county through our lobbying efforts at the state through the WCA, Wisconsin Counties Association, who has been successful in multiple campaigns and changing things. So this is the way of Marathon County expressing their desire to be consistent with the rest of the state.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, we will move on to item 9B2A from the Human Resources, Finance and Property Committee and Infrastructure Committee. Approve the 2023 budget transfers for Marathon County Department of Appropriations, Resolution R-8-23. Any questions? Vice Chair McEwen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My little iPad here is saying cancel, but I just wanted to give an update on this budget transfer. This budget transfer is from the Highway Reserve Fund for County Road KK for a box culvert. And the reason this is being transferred from the Highway Reserve is right after the budgeting process was completed, they realized that this culvert was having some structural issues and needs to be replaced. So that's the reason for it being taken out of the Highway Reserve Fund.
There was a question also at the Finance Committee as to the amounts in the highway fund balance. To start the year in 2022, there was roughly $23.5 million in that highway fund. During 2022, 16,500 was used for bituminous resurfacing, 761,000 for 2023 bituminous resurfacing, 957,600 for rolling stock, 7,343,689 for CRP capital projects, 296,000 for the Old Plain Road project. GTA revenue was 250,000. Highway K culvert now is 500,000, leaving an unrestricted balance at the end of if the 500,000 is approved for that Highway KK box culvert project, would leave roughly 13,500,000 in that fund. That was a question that was provided at finance, and we didn't have the answers for and do now. Any other questions? Okay, we will move on to item 9B3 from Human Resources, Finance and Property, and the Environmental Resources Committee, a resolution adopting the West Side Master Plan. And we have with us the Director for Parks and Rec, Jamie. So is there any questions? Supervisor Sandalski.
Yeah, I just got a question. Do we have any numbers as far as figures per like phase, as far as costs? And that, 'cause I didn't find nothing on in the agenda at all.
The numbers are rough estimates because it all is dependent upon what projects, if any, are taken on. And some projects are dependent on other projects. And so it's all phased. And so, but Jamie, please.
Thank you, Chair Gibbs. Yes, that is correct. And we did get, part of the study does include preliminary figures for each phase. That is referenced in the document that was included in your packet. I don't know exactly which page it's on, but I can find it. But it does say, it's in Chapter 5, I believe, of the phasing and implementing, that we do have estimates, but it is highlighted there that because these are 2022 and 2023 estimates when the study was done, and this is a 15-year plan, that they're rough estimates today. Moving forward, if we build this tomorrow, they might be more accurate, but if we build it in 15 years, the price isn't going to be accurate. So we asked them not to include it in here, but we do have it as a supplement just for reference, and that's indicated in here.
Okay, any other questions? Supervisor Dickinson.
So in the document, you referenced that those numbers were given to staff, the
Yes.
dollar amounts. So where are the dollar amounts? Are they in the document? Can we have access to see generally what they are?
Yes, and I believe they were actually included in the very first presentation we gave to the Environmental Resources Committee. So I can provide those to the county board, yeah.
And they were also provided, they should be in the HR Finance Committee packet when it was also provided to the HR Finance Committee.
I can send that out extra.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, we'll move on. Thank you, Jamie. The next one we have is item 9B, 3B, a resolution to use the environmental impact funds to fund repair and replacement of the Big O Plain aerators. And we have with us from CPZ, Christy Heidenreich, from CPZ to answer any questions that the board may have in regards to that project. Supervisor Robinson, please.
My computer went dead, so I can't use open meeting. But the difference between the Environmental Resources Committee version and the Finance Committee version is we added a requirement that there be a memorandum of understanding between the affected parties relative to ownership, insurance, transfer. The proposal is for the county to buy the aerator and transfer it to a party, and we needed to have that spelled out. There's a memorandum of agreement between the parties relative to the operation of the system, but there's not one relative to the capital cost. So there are two paragraphs that were added in the Human Resources, Finance, and Property Committee to try to address those issues.
With that background information, any other questions? So at Tuesday's meeting, you'll be asked to either vote and, whatever motion comes from the floor, we can take either the suggestion would be to take the HR Finance Committee's recommendations, because it just provides a little more clarity as to how the capital is going to be utilized and how the property is going to be transferred. Any other questions? Okay. Thank you, and we'll move on. Item 9B, 4A, BEAD Local Planning Grants, Resolution 11-23. Any questions? All right. We are down to any announcements and/or requests. Just a reminder that next Tuesday's meeting is Tuesday, the 21st, with election being that day. We have moved that start of that meeting to 6 p.m. instead of the normal 7 p.m., so please mark your calendars. Next Tuesday, the board meeting will start at 6 p.m. Supervisor Krause.
Yes, I'll make this short and sweet. But this month is Afro-American History Month, and I don't know if any of you have looked anything up about Afro-American history, but I have been reading that at the beginning of our country there was a lot of violence. So if you meet any black people, I would just say, tell them they're welcome in this community and that you're glad that they're here. Thank you.
Any other announcements and/or requests? Okay, seeing none, we are down to item number 11. We have a motion by Supervisor Vensky and a second by Supervisor Dickinson to adjourn. All those, any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of adjournment signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? We stand adjourned. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.